Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm Danny Iniquitous. Today we're going to jump into the lore of the Dead 3. But before we do that, as always, a big thank you to our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. Now, let's jump into the video. The Dead 3. These are the three dark gods. Bane, Myrkul, and Bhaal. Bane is the Lord of Darkness, Tyranny, and Strife, Hatred. He's that evil dude. Definitely a big fan of his, as well as Bhaal, who's the Lord of Murder, the assassins, poisonous ways to take out enemies, publicize greater kills. That is Bhaal's forte. And Myrkul is the Lord of Bones. He's the Lord of the Dead. So literal dead entities, bones, skulls, liches are all kind of under his domain. They are an awesome trio, and they've just had such a great history in Dungeons & Dragons. Some of my favorite entities in the world. They get involved in pretty much everything, and they also have a big part to do with another character that's going to come up in their story that we're going to cover a little bit in depth the next, probably one of the next lore videos. But they are just, well, on top of just being cool in their own right, if you've ever played the Baldur's Gate games, they do have a big part in all of them, especially Bhaal. Especially in regards to Baldur's Gate 2, I believe, and a part in Baldur's Gate 3 as well. This is something you'll encounter pretty regularly just throughout any of your games in D&D, is just Bane, Myrkul, or Jergul, who's also part of their overarching history. So one of the cool things about the Dark Three is they weren't created as gods. They were just mortals. Who just adventurers who were just totally evil and corrupt. The Dark Three were really just adventurers. Like Myrkul was just a necromancer, Bhaal was an assassin, and Bane was a tyrant. So most likely he was like equivalent to a conquest paladin. They just were very effective and very power hungry, and that brought them together. And the three of them forged a pact to achieve godhood or die trying, which is awesome. I'm just so in. And they decided that they wanted to take power from a god, and the god that they chose was Jergul. Now, Jergul is the lord. At this point, is the god of the end. He's the god of tyranny, he's the god of strife, he's the god of hatred, he's the god of murder, and he's the god of the dead. He is a very, very powerful god, just in his own right. So, however they decided to pick Jergul for everything is just crazy. But in the year 357 DR, which is just ages ago, the three adventured marshaled an unlikely alliance of champions. They got wizards from a very famous collection of wizards called the Barzi. They grabbed regular soldiers from Verum, Knoll warriors, which is just very hard to do. They grabbed Goliaths and gnomes, and they defeated one of the ancient gods with this whole army. They defeated the god Marum of the Broken Spear, which is one of the seven lost gods, which is just ancient by all like our accord at this point. This is like in the early worlds of D&D. Now, after they had marshaled this huge army and fought to kill this god, they happened to find an opportunity to steal a portion of Marum's divinity for themselves. How they managed to steal this magical essence, I can't imagine it was something that Bane or Bhaal knew, because it seems like it's something that would involve a great deal of magic. So I credit this personally to Myrkul. There might be some information further out in the world that I just haven't seen or haven't come across, but they managed to absorb divinity. Now, once they absorbed divinity, they were now significantly more powerful than your average people. I mean, you gotta imagine they were the equivalent of level 20 characters at this point when they took on a god. Not an avatar of a god. And that's really important to separate. Because most of the time, when that happens, when you kill an avatar, the avatar just dissipates. And then it just takes a long time for that god or deity to create another avatar. But in that regard, they killed an actual god, an absorbed divinity. Now, with a small portion of divine power in each one of them, they traveled to a place called the Grey Waste and sought the Castle of Bone. Now, the Castle of Bone is where Jergul actually resides. That's his home. Now, my understanding as to how this happened is they strategically planned out a full-on assault to kill a god to steal just some divinity in hopes of being able to take on their actual god that they wanted to steal from, Jergul. The Grey Waste is the Grey Waste of Hades, which is an outer planar world. This is one of the really negative places that you need to be able to travel outside of your normal dimension to get to. It is a big, big deal. Now, what's important here is when they get here, it's just Bane, Bhaal, and Myrkul. And they're battling through endless hordes of undead, skeletons, specters, wraiths, zombies, and liches. Just tearing down generations of people in order to get to the lair of Jergul, in order to get to the Castle of Bone. Now, it's out of itself is a tremendous feat of strength, because you have 3 taking on upwards of thousands upon thousands with liches, specters, wraiths, all of it. Even if you got just punched through these zombies in one hit, those wraiths, those specters, they all have abilities that help to ruin you, especially in the older editions where this actually occurred in. And liches just are casters, and it's not just 1 or 2, it's all of them. Now, what's important here is once this happens, and they finally make their way to the actual throne room of Jergul, they find the throne empty. And so Pale, Bane, and Myrkul start fighting amongst each other, trying to figure out who's going to keep the throne or who's going to sit there on top of it. As that happens, Jergul shows up and offers to just step aside. He made them kill his entire army and then goes, no, you can have my throne, you can have my divinity, my portfolios, everything. And so again, at this point, they're the Dark Three. The Dark Three start fighting amongst each other, going, oh, well, it should be me, it should be me, it should be me. And Jergul states that he'll offer it to all of them, and that way they could all split it, otherwise no one's going to win this argument. And Jergul, this is the best part, offers his guidance to them after he bestows upon them his divine portfolios. Now, a little thing about divine portfolios. The more portfolios you have, the stronger of a god you are. You got to take into consideration, one of the best example is the gods of war. The gods that have the divinity over war. As long as war is happening, they're gaining strength. They're getting followers. They're getting worship. And the way worship works is it funnels divine energy into the deity. So Mystra is the goddess of magic. So all people who practice magic worship her. And then the practicing of magic is imbuing her with stronger and stronger abilities. So the more portfolios you have, the more, it's almost like revenue streams of power. Now, understand, all the Dark Three at this point are so power hungry that they're ready to kill each other for it. And Jergul is watching this argument happening, and he suggests that maybe they just use it to a game of skill, and they go skull bowling, whatever that is, in order to kind of depict who a winner is. Doesn't work. They end up just devolving into big argument and fighting, which is hysterical to think about. 3 people who just murdered your entire army that you spent centuries building and are now bickering like children over your power. So then Jergul, being the awesome guy that he is, breaks off 3 of his fingers so that way they can play a game of knucklebones. in order to decide who the winner is. And Bane emerges as the winner, and he takes on the divine portfolios of hatred, strife, and tyranny. Myrkul comes in second place, and he took reign over the dead, all of the dead. And Bhaal was left with dominion over death and murder. As soon as this happened, they all kind of threatened each other. It was great because Bane says that he'll be able to rule eternally, and Myrkul says that in an instant he can take his entire kingdom from him, and Bhaal states that he can kill gods and kings and rulers, and if he wanted to, he can stay his hand so no one would feed Myrkul. And so they now all are kind of like contesting against each other. Like the instant they got divinity and became deities in their own right, they are kind of at odds with each other already. But they do end up being very unique in how they handle that. They don't just go out and try and kill each other or anything like that. So, as deities, the dead three, they reigned over their respective realms for years. Bane spread hatred and tyrannical rule across Faerun. He put thralls in the Zhentarim. Zhentarim is an organization that goes across the entire Faerun. It's the biggest organization out there, and it's basically like a gang or some sort of mafioso type organization where they have assassins, they deal drugs, they do conspiracies, they uproot empires, they're part of like shadow governments and things like that. They are a major group of bad guys. The Thieves Guild is the Zhentarim. Like, it's all those bad things kind of warped into one big organization. Myrkul, oddly enough, never enjoyed the widespread dreadful veneration as was found among the followers of Bane, but he was given constant offerings at funerals by mourning loved ones full of fear and sorrow. And Bhaal, on the other hand, became a god of immense power, having garnered servitude of Loviatar and Tolona in the divine realm, while his avatar Khazgoroth, which on Toril was believed to be an aspect of Malar. Malar is another god. That's something we're going to have to get into. But he was impersonating another god to assume the divine worship for him. And he wreaked havoc as an avatar on the Moonshae Isles of Toril. Now, here's where things start to get really, really interesting. Because we're on the precipice of the time of troubles. Right before the time of troubles, someone named Alondo, a great seer, goes to Candlekeep and has this vision that Bhaal is going to become aware of his imminent death as a god and ensure his legacy by sowing his seeds across Faerun. Now, what ends up happening is this becomes true, and Bhaal scores like lots of progeny. So he has like so many children. This is going to become really, really important later on. But Bane at this time also saw his presence going further beyond his own existence, and he decided to create his own offspring as well. But what he ends up doing is creating a half fiend that spawned between him and a true Tanari. Now, Tanari are the demons in the abyss. So Bane went down and had a child with an abyssal demon and forged a child. This is important for later on. But this brings us to the time of troubles. So Bhaal is gaining power multitudes quicker than Bane and Myrkul are. His divinity is exceeding, it's growing. His worshiper, his divine essence that's pouring into him is going through the roof in comparison to the other two. So, consumed by their greed for even more power, and seeing as Bhaal is surpassing them, Bane and Myrkul conspire to steal the tablets of fate from Eo. Now, Eo is the god of gods. And what I mean by this is his portfolio is divinity. So anyone that worships is feeding him divine power no matter what. It is like you cannot avoid this. Everyone in the D&D world worships some sort of entity because they are tangible. They show up in your life. They influence you directly. You see clerics actively using their power. There are warlocks making deals with entities. There are paladins touching magic. So like that magic is so tangible and so viewable. Even if you are from a small town in a small like area in the middle of nowhere, there's some spellcaster who has a direct understanding of a deity who has somehow, some way actually influenced them. So you can't avoid deities in this world. They are real. They are tangible. They show up. So AO is the most powerful entity in D&D. Period. Every living thing that has a soul pays a tax to AO for worshiping a divine god. And all the divine gods have all their power, and a big portion of that is not even it's basically transferable to AO, because without him they can't be received divinity. So they want to steal the tablets of fate from AO. Now the tablets of fate are powerful artifacts in the form of stone slabs that are served to maintain the balances between law and chaos. They acted as barriers between different worlds. The tablets had the additional function of recording names and the purposes of every god and primordial in the universe. The entire universe has its history of everyone that has divine powers in the upper echelon of existence. Name is forged there. Now, they were created by AO, and this was in before D&D existed, after the sundering of Aberrant. Aber is a different version of the world that we live in. Toril is the world that we live in D&D. So understand that at the time when dragons and giants fought for dominion of the world, yeah, that really actually happened. Aber Toril kind of split, and Aber had the dragons and Toril had the giants. So the dragons were horrific and evil to each other, and that's in the world of Aber, where they just still had giants here in Toril, but not as plentiful. Same thing with giants. Giants basically beat back the dragons, and then the giants were beaten back, I think, by the elves. But that's not really something we're going to get into in this video. We'll talk about it at another point. But that Aber is where the Dragonborn are actually from. There was a point where the worlds kind of overlapped each other, and that's how the Dragonborn came to D&D, and then kind of separated, which is the whole history of Dragonborn, which is a long thing. But at that point, that's when the Tablets of Fate were created. And these are very powerful objects. Wielding them, I don't know how exactly you would wield them, but they do grant you a certain upper echelon of power. So just to have them. And these AO tasked Helm with guarding them as his great divine responsibility, which is just hugely important for the cosmic order of things, which is like a whole thing that you got to get into in sort of like the entire history of how the world and the universes work. But we'll probably get into that a little bit when we talk about Asmodeus, actually. But that's a whole story for a different time. But so the Tablets of Fate, Bane and Myrkul conspire to steal them. Okay? Now, AO is just frustrated with the way the deities have been acting lately. The deities are starting to get drunk on their own power. They don't care. They don't do their duties. They're not upholding to their end of the bargain of being divine. And so AO struck down all the gods to their avatars and sending the tablets to the world of Toril, ushering in the time of troubles, as well as the dawn of the era of upheaval. The reign of each of the 3 dark gods came to an end during this day, at least temporarily. So, here's kind of what happened. All the gods became their avatars. So those who didn't have avatars are just temporarily kind of in limbo. So they're not really conscious, they're not really there, they have no influence. So it's really, really bizarre how this happens, because all the gods are also now mortal. They do still have power. They are harder to kill than any normal person would be, but they are essentially mortal. And at this time, the avatar of Bane appears on Toril as he rallied his clergy and agents of the Zhentarim and began to hunt down the Tablets of Fate. It was a mad dash. He knew what happened. All the gods knew what happened. They were basically warned that this is the result of you not being who you were supposed to be, and they were thrown down. So Ao's just watching them, kind of like trying to teach them a lesson, humility, and how they owe the people that worship them. And Bane doesn't skip a beat. He goes, I'm going to marshal my army of the Zhentarim, just the whole evil organization, and hunt down this. As this happens, as soon as he lands, he also is joined by Myrkul and Bhaal. While they still might be kind of at odds with each other, they come down and they just reform like that, like a reunion tour of the Dead Three, of the Dark Three. They are ready to go, and they are awesome at this. Because they've never forgotten being adventurers, trying to gain power beyond their reach. They basically know what to do. They start making their way towards their goals, which is awesome. They are just focused. They are locked in. Now, they assault a town of Shadowdale, which ends up in a battle with Elminster and Mystra. Mystra is the goddess of magic, all magic. The weave is her thing. And during the end of that battle, Bane finds out the location of these artifacts, and they're guarded by the Avatar of Torm in the Temple of Torm's Coming in the city of Tantris. Now, excuse me, Torm is Bane's arch enemy, basically. He is the patron deity of paladins, of the god of duty, loyalty, righteousness, obedience. He is that guy, which is the polar opposite of Bane. So there's a little bit of kind of like, it's almost poetic. Like they are now going to head off to each other for some very powerful items. They are kind of destined to meet at some point. So Myrkul at this time appeared in West Faerun and proceeded to travel to this temple called Chontian in the Golden Fields in the Sword Coast north of it. The avatar of the god of death was defeated in battle by a high priest named Tolgar and Nuvian, a feat which nearly killed the crazed venturer. But sometime after the battle, Myrkul learned the location of one of the tablets and reclaimed the artifact and brought it to his realm in the great waste of Hades. Being still the deity of death, he was defeated, but he wasn't killed. But he did find out, it's crazy how he managed to find it out, because they don't really tell you. It's just after this battle where he was defeated, he learns the location of the tablets. And he gets it. And he takes it to the great waste of Hades, which is Jergul's old home, which Myrkul kind of just assumed. So, one tablet in tow, and the other one still up in the air. This leads them to what's called the Battle of Tantris, which is where Bane had found out the other temple had the other tablet. So, Bane's forces prepare to invade the city. Myrkul and his clergy were working on a mass-scale death spell, having gained the true names of all the assassins of Faerun. His worshippers killed scores of followers of Bhaal in a single moment. That's not good. But that's horrific. Meanwhile, the priests of Bane performed a ceremony known as the Stealing of Souls, which allowed them to harness the great amount of life force that had been released at once. So they kill all of Bhaal's, not all, but a huge portion of Bhaal's followers, and they absorb those souls, and they're using it as like a spell battery for their assault on this temple. So Bane's essence was transferred from his avatar to the colossal, massive, armored statue of black glass known as the Black Brother. The gargantuan aspect of the Black Lord marched on Dragon Reach towards the city of Tantris to claim the found Tablet of Fate. He met a titan-sized lion-headed Torm. The true deity had himself been empowered by thousands of lives offered in sacrifice by the faithful of the city, given upon their god's request. So, again, here's Bane, darkness, tyranny, strafe. Myrkul kills a whole bunch of followers of Bhaal. Bane absorbs those souls and uses it to funnel his avatar into this giant black glass, massive armored statue. And as he's walking to go beat down the city, here comes Torm, who had just asked his followers to give up their lives so he can do the same thing. It's crazy. And the two gods battle over the city. It was massive. The sky was being torn apart. The land underneath was quaking. It was just like Godzilla and King Kong fighting over a city. It was incredible. And Bane and Torm destroyed one another in a blast of silver radiance, followed by a massive explosion. So Bane, dead. Torm, dead. Which is just wild. But that was the only way they were going to get into the city. Now Myrkul is still around, and he already has one tablet. So at this point, after the death of Bane and Torm, the mortal thief Cyric. Now Cyric is going to be important, and we're going to have to talk about him later. Just know Cyric is awesome. He is, excuse me, he is just crazy. He has domain of trickery. He was a former worshiper of Bhaal, Baal, and Myrkul, and he's chaotic evil. He is a human. He has so many titles. He is the Prince of Lies, the Dark Sun, the Black Sun, the Mad God, the Lord of Three Crowns, the Lord of Four Crowns, the Fateless, the One, the All, the Face Behind the Mask, the Everything, the Most Mighty, the Highest of the High, Almighty, the One and the All, the Mad One, the Dark Prince, the Prince of Madness, the Assassin, and the Foul One. He is one of my favorite deities, and what he does during the time of troubles is awesome. He plays a big hand in the overarching scheme of it. Just know he was a human thief who had a horrible upbringing, and we are definitely going to go talk about this, who ends up joining the Zhentarim, and during the time of troubles is an absolute badass. He does everything. He is one of the bigger characters involved, and he definitely gains his reputation through this moment. So Cyric betrays Midnight and Kelemvor and Adon, who are his friends in the events preceding the death of Bane. He rallied the Zhentarim soldiers, which are soldiers from the Zhentarim, who are already there in search of his former friends who he had betrayed, and I believe he gets them trapped or in prison at this point. And he finds them and finds the Tablets of Fate because they recovered them. Kelemvor and Midnight. Kelemvor is another deity of death. It's a whole big thing with Myrkul that is kind of something we have to go when we speak specifically about Myrkul. But Midnight is the avatar of Mystra. So after Mystra was killed earlier on, she got absorbed into her avatar, which is Midnight. Kelemvor later becomes a deity of death in his own right, but Cyric finds out that they have the tablet, and he sends his Zhentarim soldiers out there. Now, the adventurers began, Kelemvor, Adon, and Midnight, began their voyage across the sea to the city of Waterdeep. Bhaal, as well as Myrkul, learned that the artifact in their possession, and the Lord of the Dead dispatched his Night Riders to intercept them. So, these guys are on their way to Waterdeep with the tablet. Cleric is the one that tells Bhaal and Myrkul that they have the tablet. He's the one who betrays them. That's kind of how his betrayal works. So, they all start making their way towards Waterdeep. Now, the adventurers are fortunate, and they began to escape Myrkul's, his soldiers who are chasing after them, his Night Riders. Now, as they're escaping, there's a brief reunion between Midnight and Cleric. Cleric, who is now wielding the sword God's Bane. God's Bane is important because God's Bane, in and out of itself, is the sword form adopted by the god Mask during the time of troubles. The god Mask, seeing the time of trouble, decides not to use an avatar but becomes a blade. Now, the power of God's Bane is it's needed to consume the energy of souls to survive. She sucked in all blood from her victims, giving her a blood-red hue. When starved for a long time, she gradually faded to white. Before she came into existence into the grasp of Cleric. God's Bane had driven all of her previous wielders mad, forcing them to sustain her by killing victims. Eventually, the blade would be stolen by another, and the former wielder's thoughts would always be focused on recovering it. They would never sleep until they recovered the blade or died trying. So, Cleric is wielding a god as a weapon. While he reunites with Midnight as they escape from Myrkul's Night Riders, Cleric tells Midnight that he's the one who revealed to Bhaal and Myrkul where the tablet was. The avatars of two of the dead three in pursuit of Midnight, which would be Bhaal and Myrkul, because Bane is already dead. Cleric tried to convince them to join him in recovering the other tablet and ascending into godhood. Cleric wanted Midnight to help him become a god by killing Bhaal and killing Myrkul and taking their tablet. Now, he, at this point, had garnered the entire Zentarum under his banner. So they're doing what he says. They're following him as Bane went down, and everyone is kind of working with Bhaal and Myrkul. So the avatar of Bhaal manages to track down Midnight and her companions. And they battle through this entire Corminian keep in this place called Highhorn. There happened to be a gate, like a dimensional gate, beneath the Dragonspear Castle there, which was transversible only by mortals, and that would grant access to the Grey Wastes, where Myrkul held the second tablet. And Bhaal was temporarily halted by Midnight as she cast a spell that trapped him in, like, amber. So, in a short time after that, Bhaal escapes and continues after Midnight. Cleric and his former companions agreed to work together. So, Cleric, Kelemvor, and Midnight agreed to work together and become deities at this point. Now, what's great here is Bhaal finds them and attacks them and kills some of their friends and their lieutenants and their people that are with them. So Bhaal is fighting Cleric, he's fighting Midnight, and he's fighting Kelemvor. Cleric plunges God's Bane into the back of the Lord of Murder, permanently destroying his avatar. Bhaal is screaming in torment, writhing in agony and screaming as Cleric and everyone gets teleported away by Midnight. Cleric kills Bhaal. Cleric erases Bhaal's avatar permanently. So Bhaal has no way to return to his body. He's dead. Now, Bane is dead, Bhaal is dead, and Myrkul has the last tablet. So they run rampant. They go to Waterdeep. They go into everywhere they can. They're trying to find their way to the portals that can bring them to the Grey Wastes. It's a whole mad dash because Myrkul is still on the loose and he still has entities that are chasing after them. Myrkul is still very, very powerful. So he's still dropping incredibly dangerous spells and killing things all over the place in areas around Midnight and Cyric and Kelemvor. It is just horrible, the amount of death that's occurring in his attempts to capture them and kill them. So it takes some time, but eventually Cyric and the party do manage to kill the avatar of Myrkul. And once Myrkul is dead, all of them are now the Dead Three. That's how they get their name. They're all dead. Now, how the Time of Troubles follows out is a tale for a different story. But afterwards, after Cyric and Midnight and Kelemvor all gain the 2 parts of the tablet, and the Time of Trouble ends, everything from the Dead Three, who used to be the Dark Three, now officially are the Dead Three, their influence doesn't go away. Each god was clever enough to find a way to sustain themselves. Now, Bane hid away his divinity in the form of his half-mortal son, the half-demon that he fathered with a true Tanari. And after just about a decade of absence, his divinity reconstituted Bane from taking the body of his mortal half-son. Bhaal had ensured his legacy by impregnating scores of women who gave birth to the quarreling Bhaal spawn. And most of Bhaal's murderous progeny killed each other off in short. They basically came, it's kind of like Highlander. Like they all just knew that they were out there and they just started killing each other. And only until there was one left, because there can be only one, that one became Bhaal after about a century. That one was like everyone he killed, like the quickening kind of happened and absorbed more of Bhaal's power into that entity. And once they were all done, Bhaal was reborn. And Myrkul had imbued his spirit in an artifact known as the Crown of Horns. While he could not readily reclaim his divinity, as that had been taken by Cyric, because of course Cyric takes Myrkul's divinity, because he had killed him, and well, he had died, I think, from Midnight, but he was there and he was able to absorb that divinity. And then he bestowed that divinity upon his mortal enemy Kelemvor. Now, Kelemvor at this point becomes a god of the dead. Now, though Myrkul was still existent in the Crown of Horns, and Kelemvor did take over that world, eventually Myrkul found a way to return to his true form after that, but still spreading out his influence and just kind of patiently waiting. Like Myrkul gets really smart in his actions. So this is how the Dark Three become the Dead Three in their own right. Now they all have stories and events and actions that they take separately, and those are good enough for their own video in their own right. But they are awesome. Right, that is going to be it for this video. If you like the Dead 3, if you enjoy any one of these, like I personally love Bhaal a lot. I think he's awesome. definitely give this a like and subscribe. Definitely tell us about your experiences. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, the link is in the description. If you like World of Warcraft, check us out on our new streaming channel that we're going on. It's up now, and the link will be in the description. With all that said and done, thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.